Greetings and salutations. I hope this video finds you doing well. What I'd like to do in this video is respond to some of the comments that I received on my last video, which was sort of kinda but not really a review of Linux Mint 20 Ulyana. It really wasn't even a look at because I never got it running, so it was more like a chat about, which is something that I pointed out when I posted the video. It's like the first thing I said. People have taken that particular video to mean that I am somehow an Ubuntu fanboy now and I am biased against Linux Mint. So I would like to respond to some of the comments that I have received and expand on what I said in that original video. I don't think a lot of people listened to the entire video and they just got mad and started typing, which people do quite frequently when they deal with online content. I've noticed that. You have to absorb what the creator has to say before you can go form an opinion, folks. It makes things a lot better. But people aren't going to do that because they're impatient and very busy these days and can't be bothered to take time to think. I know that. So, to start out here, I want to talk a little bit about the political statement that Linux Mint is making to the folks at Canonical, which is the company that distributes Ubuntu, and this all concerns Linux Mint's distaste for the snap package environment. So, if you go into Linux Mint and you open up the software manager, which is where you can install your software, and you try and install the Chromium browser, you will get this message. It says, "This is a dummy package. It can safely be removed. Chromium browser is no longer available as a package in the repository, but only as a snap. Linux Mint does not support snap and will not let packages install snap behind your back. You can download and update Chromium directly from blah 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 chromium.org website." Linux Mint, let me make this perfectly clear right up front because I said it in the video. Linux Mint, instead of using Chromium as a political statement, could have very easily packaged it themselves and made it available in the Linux Mint repositories. They do that with several applications already because what they have done is forked applications that did not meet their vision of a user experience. And they call these the X apps, okay? These are packages that they didn't like client-side decorations, so therefore they wanted to have traditional buttons and menus. No problem with that. It's a big responsibility to maintain those packages, but they have decided to do that. I personally like the X apps. I like Pix, and I like Xed especially. They could have done exactly the same thing with Chromium. There's no reason why they couldn't have done it. It's actually quite easy to create deb packages. But instead of making it a seamless experience for the user, which they are doing all of this other work supposedly for, the user experience, they decided to make a political statement about it. And I'm not happy with that. I think that that is the wrong way to go. I'm not 100% happy with the fact that Ubuntu rather, I almost said Linux Mint, is doing the snap switcheroo in the background on Chromium, although I understand exactly why they're doing it, which is because they are seeing it as a way to conserve effort and get an updated version of Chromium out in the situation where they have to actually maintain 4 different versions of Chromium for 4 different supported versions of Ubuntu, depending on where they are in the release cycle. I can understand that. But also, when you run an apt command at a command line, you are expecting to get a deb package and not be switched to a snap. So I completely understand that. However, Chromium, dear Ubuntu and Linux Mint, is only one package out of the 40 or 50,000 other packages that are available. And people are making this big of a deal over it. It's not that big a deal, folks. So, essentially, just to make sure that I'm perfectly clear, I'm not 100% happy with what Canonical is doing with the Chromium project here. But at the same time, Linux Mint could have found about 3 different other ways to do this. They could have installed this from a Flatpak, since they support Flatpaks. They could have created their own deb package to do that without making it a big deal to the end user, especially new users to Linux who don't know anything about snaps, Flatpaks, or anything and don't give a damn to begin with. That's why I'm upset about it. I hope that's perfectly clear. So now let's get into the comments over this subject, because I would like to address them directly. This is just for fun, by the way. I'm not taking anything that anybody says personally. I'm not complaining about negative comments. I'm just showing you what people are saying, and I'm going to respond to it. That's it. So, I don't need the stuff in the comment section about don't listen to the trolls. Nobody here is a troll. They posted their opinion. Whether I agree with them or not, doesn't make any difference. Okay, so Chris Donnelly says, terrible review. Your bias has got in the road of doing a demonstration on practically anything to do with Linux Mint. I didn't think that video was particularly biased one way or the other. I think I related my experiences with Linux Mint. I usually have no issues whatsoever making Linux Mint run in virtual environments. I prefer to do distribution reviews in a virtual environment so that I can show you the install process and we can have some fun with it and poke at it. And it's a lot easier to do it that way than it is to try and run it on hardware and capture it while it's running and stuff like that. But in this particular instance, I could not make that work. And so I don't think it was necessarily biased in any way other than the fact that, yes, I was a bit frustrated with the entire process because I had spent an entire morning poking at this. Not only that, on this channel for like the last 5 years, I think I've given about 50-50 exposure to Linux Mint and Ubuntu, and we've talked about other distributions as well. I mean, I used to do distributions like OpenSUSE and Fedora and Manjaro and all. I don't do that anymore. I stopped doing distro reviews in general because of stuff like this, because people take it as a tribal thing, like you're biased one way or the other. I personally find this to be silly, Chris, to tell you the truth. I mean, come on. It's Linux. When you get right down to it, all the distributions are the same. It's all the same crap. It's just how it's packaged. So I will move on from that. I don't quite get the whole bias thing. Other than the trend today does seem to be that if somebody expresses something that does not validate your choices, a lot of people take it that this person is automatically biased. No, they're relating their experience, which is different than yours. Anyway, so we have this from PenClass76. Also, the fact that Mint 20 not working on Gnome Boxes is a problem of Gnome Boxes and not of Mint, right? Well, it seems to work on everything else but Mint. I'm not really sure if that is a problem of Gnome Boxes or Mint, but I didn't really say either way, now did I? What I said is that I couldn't get it running in Gnome Boxes. Wouldn't work at all. Matter of fact, the exact problem is that there was no mouse pointer at all in Gnome Boxes. The desktop actually would render properly, but there was no way to control it. So is that a Mint problem? Is that a Gnome Boxes problem? I don't know. And I said so in the video. I mean, so many people have it working in VB and VM is kind of a clue, isn't it? You make a totally biased review. Once again, this thing about bias. How is it bias for me to relate my experiences as is? Bias would mean that I walked in somehow not liking Linux Mint. And anybody who's been around this channel knows that I'm a huge supporter of the Linux Mint project, and I still am, even if I'm not using it every day myself. We'll talk more about that later on in the video. Be so obvious. I wasn't... See, that's the thing that gets me. It wasn't bias. Yes, I was frustrated at that point because I had spent all morning trying to do a video, but I wasn't necessarily directing that at Linux Mint. So, here's another one here. This is from Leon Kripp. Ubuntu versus Mint. Why you recommend Ubuntu Mate nowadays? I've been following you since 2017, and when I start using Linux Mint in parentheses, don't really remember why you now recommend Ubuntu Mate to newbies. I thought Mint was the go-to place for ex-Windows user, extremely user-friendly, out-of-the-box experience. Okay, so let's get into this, because I've really never addressed this. I have said in videos in the past that I prefer these days to work with people when they're starting out and put them on Ubuntu Mate. The Ubuntu Mate experience is more familiar for people who are coming from Windows. So if you're used to using Windows 7 and you come into it, I can set you up with Ubuntu Mate, and it's very seamless. People seem to really just latch right onto it. It used to be that way with the Cinnamon desktop, and the problem now with Cinnamon is that they have decided that they're going to have a quote-unquote more modern look, to look more like Windows 10 and act more like it. And a lot of people find that to be a turnoff because they don't like Windows 10. They're coming to Linux to get away from Windows 10, but yet we want to look like Windows 10 so we can be more modern. Yes, they do give you the choice in the welcome screen, but it's still a bone of contention. Linux Mint, in the last, I would say, 2 or 3 releases, has gotten to a point now where they are constantly putting messages in your face, goading you to do something. Set up your repositories. Set up the snapshots. You did this. Oh, click on that. And it really confuses new users. I don't know whether they realize that or not. But it's like the system tray thing going on, where they have this little application now that alerts you to issues with the system, and I disagree with some of the things that it alerts you to, like setting a root password. And as I mentioned in the last video, they shouldn't be doing that if they're based on Ubuntu. And the reason why is because the Ubuntu security scheme is that you do not actually activate the root account. When you do something as root, you are acting as root, but you are not root. You can't actually switch over to broot. Even if you use the su command in Ubuntu, you are still running sudo in sudo s mode, which means that it never times out. That's what root is in Ubuntu. And the idea behind that is that somebody cannot hack an account that is not actually activated. Now, a lot of people don't get that when I try and explain it, and they come back and they go, blah, blah, blah. Go look it up before you type anything in the comments. Go read it. So Linux Mint decided in Linux Mint 19 that they were going to start encouraging users to set a root password. That is fine for Debian, because Debian, that is the way Debian works. You set a root password. You can have sudo privileges in Debian as well, but there's going to be a root account set. It's been a long time since I've installed Debian, so I don't remember whether they give you the choice in the installer or not, but traditionally that's how it works. So I believe that in Linux Mint Debian Edition, you do that. You do set your root password, and you don't have a choice to opt out of that, which is fine. That's the way that works. That's the way Debian is set up to work. Ubuntu is set up differently. So I have an issue with that. I don't think users should have to do that. And it's also more confusion for users when you're all of a sudden, they're like, wait a minute, I already got this set up. And anyway, there's all kinds of stuff like that in Linux Mint. There's all of this feature creep nowadays in Linux Mint. We've got Warpinator. We've got the IM thing that it's in there. If you go to the startups, it's like all this stuff that's running in the background, all this crap that's going on, and it's not really necessary. And it confuses people. Because if I set somebody up on Linux Mint, like Linux Mint 19 and above, then I get all these questions later. Well, how do I update the kernel, and how does this happen? And the other thing is why is it telling me I have no more space in my boot? Why do I not have any space in the boot partition, which is what it does when it fills up with kernels and stuff like that. Ubuntu, what I can do with Ubuntu Mate is set somebody up on the phone. I can be talking to them. I don't have to be there. And I can tell them, click this, do that. Now follow the wizard in the welcome menu here, and maybe I'll tell them to change some of the settings in the update manager. And then from that point forward, it takes care of itself. Ubuntu also these days automatically removes old kernels, whereas Linux Mint has kind of that clunky kernel tool, which years ago made sense, but nowadays it doesn't. So it's something that I don't like. Now, let's go on to the next comment. There's several. I could go on and on with the differences. But, I mean, if you've been using Linux Mint forever, great. Go right ahead. If you're used to this environment, you want to go on, there's nothing wrong with it. I really don't like their hard stand on snap packages. That's what Mohan Ram says. I agree. They want you to get Chromium from the project's website. That's fine. But what they don't tell you is that you have to go to the project's website every 6 or so weeks and get the latest build, as it doesn't auto-update. Absolutely, it does not. So we're talking about newbie users here because we're talking about Linux Mint. So instead of packaging this and putting it in the Linux Mint repositories and going around it that way, this is how they've done it. So they're screwing new users who don't understand how this works to begin with. Not a fan, boys and girls. This is one from Goring. I hope I said that correctly. I'm very happy with the direction Linux Mint is going. They have also started to focus on Linux Mint Debian edition. They respect their users and the community. Unlike Bloatbuntu, they don't force their ideas on their users. You remember when you uninstalled default programs in Windows and when it put it back. They went on. But the main part is what I want to respond to up top. First of all, I'm glad you're happy, and I'm happy for you, so I don't have anything to say about that. I have a really hard time saying that Linux Mint is respecting their users when they are using their users to make a political statement like this. Sorry. Now, as far as focusing on Linux Mint Debian Edition, I agree. And at the end of the video that I posted before, I said quite clearly, I really think it's time for Linux Mint to stop using Ubuntu as a crutch. And I think what they need to do is just go with the Debian Edition. Linux Mint Debian Edition, in many ways, is a better experience because Ubuntu, they move so quickly and they have that 6-month release cadence. So there's this thing about having all these different releases. Linux Mint 20, we'll have 20.1, 0.2, 0.3 as we roll along and that sort of stuff, right? It's a headache for users, whereas the Debian edition tends to be almost rolling in the way it's done, and it's a more stable experience. So yes, I agree with that. But as far as them, I would say that Linux Mint respected their users up to now. But now it's like, what are you doing? You know? Don't get me wrong, Joe, but this is the first time I felt that your video was like a paid commercial for Ubuntu. Okay. And I am following you long time and admire your work. Okay, we all know how much you love Ubuntu and all that, but I also, well, I guess that's MHO, think that Mint has doing it right by not supporting snaps to be installed without my own user approval. Well, they're not just not supporting it, they're blocking it, which is the other thing that I wanted to talk about, because one of the things I mentioned in that video was the fact that Mint is blocking the installation of Snap, and yes, it is true that you can remove a couple of files and then it works and all that happy crap, but now, once again, put yourself in the position of a new user that goes to a web page, there's a piece of software they want to run, and there's a Snap package available, and they decide to install it, and then it doesn't work on Linux Mint. Think about that for a minute, okay? I am not an Ubuntu fanboy. I'm an Ubuntu user. Ubuntu has been the central part of this channel since day one, so all of a sudden now I'm being told that I'm a fanboy because I am posting a less than favorable review of something that the Linux Mint project does. Okay. I agree that most could have packaged, that Mint could have packaged Chromium, rather, but I prefer their solution to Ubuntu's. So great job, Mint team. Purging Snapd and everything related to that bloated proprietary nuisance is the way to go. So you're supporting the fact that Linux Mint is making a political statement by denying users the ability to install a package, Mr. Comer. Okay, that's your opinion. But, I mean, look at the tone of this, too. This tribal warfare within the Linux community. You know, if we stopped bickering about stupid shit like this and actually got together and there wasn't so much fragmentation, we could dominate the world. I said that on Facebook the other day. Goodbye, JC. I followed your reviews all along, but not this one. Am stuck with Mint, not crossing the line to Ubuntu. At least Mint just works and are true to their promise. Nothing behind my back, however harmless it is. Well, I'll see you, Timothy. But before I go, let me tell you that I never encouraged anybody in that video to dump Mint and install Ubuntu. I said that my own personal view is that I don't see the reason to install Linux Mint these days. That was it. I didn't encourage Ubuntu. I just said I thought Ubuntu was doing a better job for the end user. Okay? We got the last one here, I think. This is the one from Tim. This is actually a nice one. Congratulations on getting to 100K and a good review despite your difficulties. I feel a bit sad about the status of the Linux Mint project nowadays. So do I, Tom. So do I. And agree with your analysis, and also the whole Snapd thing has brought out the looning Linux conspiracy crowd who seem to forget that what made LM great was a strong focus on ease of use and ability to add value because of their easy usage. It would be a huge improvement if they made a clean break to Debian, plus their own repos, and not be beholden to Canonical or blame it. I agree with you 100%. That is exactly what I said at the end of the video that I had posted. That is exactly what I said. I said that I think it's time for Linux Mint, if they're not happy with what Canonical is doing, to sever ties with them and focus 100% from this point forward on Linux Mint Debian Edition. But, as I also pointed out, Linux Mint has put themselves in a situation now where they are committed to support Linux Mint 20 Ulyana for the next 5 years. So they're going to have to deal with Canonical, whatever they do, for the next 5 years. And in the past, there has been a somewhat amicable, you know what word I was trying to say, relationship between Canonical and Linux Mint. But now, that might not be the case. So could it not be said that Clem and those who lead the Linux Mint project have just actively bitten the hand that feeds, since they depend so dearly on Canonical? Would it have not been better to work out a solution that was a win-win instead of a lose-lose? We'll see. I, for one, can tell you that I will be watching this carefully as time rolls on, and we'll see where the dust settles when it settles. But I hope that I have made myself perfectly clear on where I stand. I do not dislike or hate the Linux Mint project. I have defended the Linux Mint project for years when other people have attacked it. But do I think that Linux Mint Ulyana 20 is a great distribution and you should dump whatever you're running right now to go get it? No, I don't. I think it's a reactionary, politically charged release that they sort of just kind of phoned in, except for the addition of the Warpinator application, which is debatably useful depending on who you are. There you go. As always, thank you for watching. I certainly do appreciate it. Your feedback is always welcome. You know, the sad thing is that less people will watch this video than watch the original video, which this video was a reaction to. But I still want to hear your comments, and you can have fun with it. I'm sure I'll get called more names, and be told how biased I am, and what a fanboy I am, and I must be part of the Canonical Snap Package conspiracy. Oh my God, how horrible. Check out Easy Linux online at easylinux.com, or you can check out EzeeTalk as well, which is our forum where you can join in the discussion. And you can also give Easy Linux a like on Facebook if you are a Facebook user. I look forward to hearing from you there. We'll do it again soon.